welcome to Unfiltered Unspoken. I see your face smiling back there.
Oh, that was a great intro. Thank you for having me. I'm honored.
My pleasure. Thank you. So I told you we're going to continue to bring life experiences, and we're going to bring in Norm today. And Norm is an ex-state cop of 26 years that went through some drug prescription addictions, some trauma. But I'm not going to tell it. I'm going to bring him up so he can give you an introduction. Hey, Norm, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
We're still here.
You want me to do the intro? Okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to lead me. I'm a little dumb. Um, I, I'm 61 years old. I've been a police officer for 26 years, and during that time, I suffered a lot of traumatic incidents. And prior to those, I didn't know God, and I didn't really have a way to build up resilience against these traumas. And then in 1998, I was diagnosed with a neuro-muscular disease, which caused the atrophy of my muscles in my extremities and deadened the nerves in my extremities. And then after undergoing 30 surgeries within a 10-year period on my feet, doctors kept feeding me opioids. And, they had a reason to, so I'm not blaming the doctors, but I used those pills to really manage my emotions more than I did manage the pain. And later on, without knowing it, I really became addicted. And in 2009, my daughter, who was 24 at the time, she ended up getting liver tumors, and the diagnosis was real poor. And they said that she probably wouldn't survive the surgery. And that just led me down a road that I could never really come back from. And after that, I made some serious mistakes, judgment errors, and I ended up getting arrested and sentenced with 14 years in federal prison for what I ended up doing was I ended up stealing some drugs out of evidence to give to another guy who needed it. And then in prison, I ended up getting healed from my PTSD. My daughter was healed, I believe, from God, because I found God, and not that he was missing, but I found him. I came to him. I submitted to him. And things just in my life turned around. In prison, I got my master's degree in theology and counseling. I ended up getting my doctorate in counseling and my certificate in alcohol addiction. Right now, my daughter ended up being healed, so she's doing really good right now. And right now, I'm a drug and alcohol counselor on a men's residential facility, and I'm a chaplain. I think that made it under 2 minutes.
Yes, you did good. You did very good. All right. So, like we tell everybody, we like to start from the beginning, from the origin, because that normally gets us to our destination, or the road it takes us to our destination. Mm-hmm. So growing up, I know you said your career that you were in was an ex-cop. Growing up, did you come from a family of police officers, or did you suffer any trauma as a child, or upbringing that might take you down the wrong path?
No, actually, I had a great childhood. I was a middle-class family. I was the only child, so I was spoiled. My dad was a mechanic, so at the beginning, I was learning about cars, and I just love cars, and I used to race cars and stuff. But then I felt that wasn't my calling. So I worked on cars from about 16 to about 22. And at somewhere around 22, 23, I felt like something was missing out of my life. And I ended up going on a police ride-along. So that's where citizens can ride with the police in their car and see what they do. And I loved it. I felt it was my calling. So from then on, what I did is I went to a police academy and worked as a reserve, which is a volunteer position under the supervision of a employed police officer. And just to make sure, because if I quit, I'd have to sell my business or my dad's business, and that would be a huge deal. But I loved it. And my dad we sold the business, and I went to be a police officer from that day on.
Awesome. I want to jump into it. I have a question. I've been waiting to ask you this. So 26 years on the force, why would you go in and give someone that can cause you to give someone something that can cause you to lose your job?
That's a long story, right? That's it's not only the PTSD that profoundly changes your outlook on life, right? It influences your decision making ability. It begins the process of living life for yourself at that moment, right? Because what we do is we end up developing triggers. A trigger is anything that reminds us of that incident. And with me, it was a lot of things like, for instance, railroad tracks. I mean, that sounds funny, but when I came upon a railroad track, I would get a panic attacks. And the reason was because during my career, when I worked traffic enforcement, I took a couple of pedestrian versus train accidents. And you can imagine what happens to a human body when it gets hit by a train at 60 miles an hour. And I was picking up body parts and stuff for hours and hours. And it just, those visions are ingrained in you, you know. When there's a fireworks or a backfire of a car, you know, I'll go into a panic mode because I've been shot at. My police car has been shot at before, and thank God I was never hit. Thank God I've never had to fire a gun at anybody, but I've been shot at, and I've seen really the worst that Satan has to offer. And this is nothing new. I'm not trying to pat myself on the back saying, hey, I did this. No, this is what every police officer sees on a daily basis. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't understand that because they don't see that part of policing, especially in TV. The cop shoots 10 people and the next day he's at work, having a donut. It's unreal. And this is the things that wound people. So when you're on that downward spiral, and then being addicted to the opioids didn't help either, because when you're taking the pills, you're in a different mindset, right? You really don't think about what's right and what's wrong. You just do what you want to do because that's right there for you. It's very difficult to explain. I never thought I was addicted because I thought that these were prescribed medications that I was getting from a doctor, and he kept giving them to me, so it was all right. But later on, I realized that, wow, I was taking 2, 3, 4 times the amount that was prescribed, and your decision-making ability goes. And then when my daughter looked like she was going to be die on the surgery table, I became self-destructive. I tried to commit suicide twice. I wasn't able to. I did a lot of dangerous things in my work. And so I really imploded. I have no excuse for it. These were my decisions and I did it. But unless you're there and you are walking in those shoes, you can never understand why you make such stupid decisions.
Yes, sir. And throughout that whole process, from your injury to the addiction, even to your daughter's illness, how did everything going on with you affect family? Were you married at the time? Did you stay married? Did it cause any, issues within the family dynamic? How was that for you?
Well, just before my diagnosis, I got divorced from my first wife, where I have my children from, and I met another nice lady. It affected it negatively. They stayed with me, my children and my wife stayed with me, because they knew me how I was, right, and they saw the gradual change in me. And it started off with severe depression. I mean, my days off or my hours off that I had, I would just be depressed. I would be miserable, angry person. And my wife told me my second wife, she told me many times, you need to get help. You something wrong with you. You changed from the person I knew you to be. And, in the police culture, and I'm going to put it in the first responder culture, which is the police, firemen, paramedics. I'm going to throw in medical doctors and nurses for emergency rooms. I'm going to lump it all in there. You have to have this warrior mentality, right? You have to be strong. You have to be able to compartmentalize the issues that are going on around you and do your job. You can't see a broken a child that has just been in a traffic accident and have their legs broken and they're crying, you can't just sit there and cry with them. You have to go on and do your job. And if you don't do your job, then you're labeled as a chicken or a mentally ill. And if you do seek help, then you're considered weak. And weakness in that warrior mentality and that warrior culture that the first responders have put themselves in, it's a career killer. If I would have asked for help during my worst times, it's changing now, but remember, this was 20 years ago now. If I would have asked for help, they would have sent me to the city psychologist or the state psychologist. And so they're employed by them, right? And I was to tell those people, hey, last night I put a gun to my head and I almost killed myself. The first call that would be was to the chief, and they take me off duty and they would relieve me of my work. And nobody wants that. And I understand to a lot of people that's wrong, because you shouldn't have someone that's not fit for duty on the police or on the fire department. And I totally agree with that. I really do. But there's something about that culture of machoism and that warrior thing that is very difficult to overcome. And that's why a lot of police suicides now, I believe the latest statistic is, I think there were like 50 officers this year that were shot and killed, and there's like 49 that were committed suicide. So we're almost 50-50 about from suicide to murder. So there's a real big problem. And I understand they're trying to redirect it. They're trying to fix it. But you can't ask a cop to be strong and just run towards all the bullets when everybody's running away, but then not, be affected by those things that they see.
Wow. That's a powerful message right there. It's a powerful message. I want to ask, do you think there should be more trauma resources within law enforcement, instead of them brushing it under the table, but to actively maybe a weekly or bi-weekly or monthly intervention to help the officers? I mean, especially, I could only imagine PTSD is common within the police force.
Yeah, it's not talked about. Well, at least I'm all the things that I'm saying are going to be in my time, because of the decisions I made and because I was in prison. I can't get any of my ex-friends or working co-workers to even talk to me, because now I'm shunned and I'm considered a scumbag because of the crime I committed. And that's another thing that, it's the police work is judgment. It's us versus them, the cops versus everybody else. And I'm hoping that someday I can really influence that decision-making process on them. But yes, there needs to be, I was in narcotics for 16 years. I think that was too much. I think that every 3 or 4, maybe 5 years, that there should be a fit for duty test, a mental evaluation. The problem becomes if the officer is going to tell the truth or not. I've known a lot of men that have police officers that have shot people in the line of duty. They were really never the same after that, because I knew who they were before, and they went to fitness of duty tests and they just lied to the psychologist. Oh yeah, I'm fine. This and this and this, but no, I'm doing okay. And without further deeper testing, that person's going to go right back to duty. And so I do believe there should be a fit for duty testing for people in long-term assignments. I don't think anybody should be in an assignment for over 5 years, even though back when I was doing it, I wanted to do it my whole career. And I do think that there are resources out there right now. The problem that I see in it currently is that no matter what you say to the psychologist gets reported to your chief. So in other words, nothing's confidential. And that's why in my case, I believe that the church needs to play a bigger role. If I could have went to the church and spoke to a pastor or a counselor there that was experienced in trauma, I believe that I probably could have prevented all this stuff from happening by understanding who God is and who he sees me as. But the churches right now are failing us in that respect. Not cops and firemen, but I believe the whole congregation. I haven't really heard a lot of pastors promoting mental well-being as they probably should. But that's what needs to happen. There needs to be another way that an officer can go off-site to a psychologist and unburden themselves with what they're feeling without being judged by their department.
Now, I don't want to go into too much of the, indiscretions of the police department, but only because I see that, the fact that you don't have these relationships with people anymore, or former coworkers, I can see it kind of still, you feel a way about it. Especially since you at this point have really turned around and, probably are better people than they are, to be quite frank, but they won't give you that chance. So to me, that would, just kind of grind my gears, because I hate not being able to at least explain myself, or, be given that chance to show, any change in me. But I find it's really maddening to me, because of all things that, the police department could kind of group together and like shun somebody for. I'm from things that I've watched, from things that I've heard, and I'm sure things that you can attest to that you don't have to, but it's common practice. I mean, people are snagging things out of evidence lockers, or it's never making it all the way to evidence lockers. So it's just, is there just certain things that, you can do to get kicked out of the police force, or where they, kind of give you that cold shoulder, or like, why is it just you? And, I'm pretty sure they know people who've done it and just maybe have not gotten caught. So what do you really think it is then? Because it's not really like, amongst the institution, it's not really a huge thing, I would assume. So what is it about you that, they just maybe are not giving it a chance, or want to follow up with you?
I think the difference with me was that I was high ranking. I was equal to a lieutenant, and I ran a multi-jurisdictional narcotic task force, and I really tarnished the badge, right? I mean, all my stuff was in the news constantly, and because of my rank and because of the power that I did have, it really was abuse of power, and you're right in a way. There's a lot of officers out there that I've seen and I've known with addictions. And I'm not talking about illegal drugs, but mostly alcohol and pills. And that's because of what they've seen, and also injuries, that they don't want to lose their job because of a bad back. So they're taking Vicodin, 20 times a day just to keep up on that. I have myself arrested several cops for doing wrong. So it does happen, but you have to understand that this type of work is done by human beings, right? And we're all sinners, we're all fallible, and we all make mistakes. And even in the best of selection process, because even during my time, I went through psychologist interviews and other tests for evaluating your character and stuff. But you see, that was back in the early 80s, and now things have changed. And plus, you have any cop that's got 10 years or more is going to start having issues. And I wasn't, but a lot of the cops nowadays are veterans from Afghanistan and such. And so you're going to get a lot of guys that have already been diagnosed with PTSD, or are suffering from PTSD, but don't want to get a diagnosis of that. So you've already got flawed people, and it's just like any other job. There's great guys. I worked with 99% of the guys I worked with were great guys, honest, reliable. But there's also a few that are bad apples, and they consider me now one of the bad apples, because I'm sorry to take so long to explain this, but you need to have the full context. So in a police academy, you don't learn why people do the things they do, right? So when I went to the police academy, you don't learn why. You just learn, okay, this person has committed a crime. This person is a criminal. So I shied away from several friends in my early stages because they had DUIs, just because they had been arrested, right? Now I don't look at them as criminals because an addiction or DUI is not what I would call a moral turpitude type of crime. But that's where the judgment comes in, right? And what happens is it's tribal. So if anybody has committed a crime, or just smoking marijuana, for instance, in my day, that was real bad. Now it's legal and everybody does it. But in my day, if I had a friend that smoked marijuana, I'd have to push him away and say, I'm sorry, I can't be friends with you anymore. So then I just huddle with my police friends, and I have no outside other influence. And this is one of the things that we need outside people to ground us, to bring us back to reality. Because once you see in politics today, if we're tribal, we're just going to stay with our own group, and then the hate is going to grow and grow and grow and grow. And then that's when it becomes bad.
So pretty much it makes you feel like you're pushing. It's almost like a domestic situation. You push people away that are there for you or your friends because you're controlling the situation. So they're pushing you away from your friends and say, just hang with the police buddies. You're judging everyone else.
Right.
Well,
right.
Wow. That's sad.
It is. And outside people is what grounds you, right? And outside people is who you can really talk to and say, hey, man, I'm really going through a tough time right now. I saw X, Y, and Z. You can't talk to your wife. There's many times when my wife came, when I came home and said, how'd your day go? Oh, fine, no problem. But I just interviewed a 4-year-old that was telling me how her uncle raped her. I can't tell her that. I mean, how am I going to do that? Then it's going to bring her down too. So you keep these things bottled up. And then, I would wake up at 3, 4 in the morning, crying my eyes out, and go downstairs and cry my eyes out, and then go back to bed. And I'm not trying to whine and snivel about this. I'm just telling you the pitfalls of this first responder culture. And this happens across the board with firemen and doctors and all those professions also.
And you previously brought up a good kind of talking point that made me want to ask, because of your ranking, I'm sure at some point you probably had a hand in like a hiring process or who was going to be on your team, who worked under you, maybe, not sure how it works there. But my question is, if you are dealing with, for instance, cadets coming in that have been in the service before, or any other issue that might cause them to have PTSD or anything else that might come, any type of mental illness that might come from trauma. Now, in the normal sense, everybody else in the civilian world, it's pretty much saying that you have a disability or type of condition of sort up front, for one, it would kind of benefit us, because to them it looks like, well, dang, we done turned down a disabled person and we could, that can go sideways. But with, the police, obviously that's something that can contribute to how they're, how they're serving the public. So how are you, I guess, how does that work? Like, are they just not stating? I know you said they don't state that they don't, sometimes that they, may have it, or just don't know that they have it and are not diagnosed. But at the same time, if you're dealing with someone that has set it up front, how did that work? Like, are they just like, well, we got to hire anyway, we don't want to deal with that legal drama. We'll see what comes of it type of thing, or, do you turn people down for that aspect?
Well, in my position, I was not involved in the hiring process, but I was able to pick officers from various other police departments to be on my team. And back then, this would be early 2000s, there wasn't much going on with PTSD, right? I mean, in my police academy in '84, there was a 4-hour block on stress, and that was it. Eat healthy and exercise, period. They didn't talk. So I didn't know anything about PTSD. It wasn't until I was diagnosed that I really understood what it was. So I wasn't involved in the hiring process, so I don't know how that works. but I do know that each officer, whether they be a veteran or not, has to go through a psychological evaluation in order to get the job. And I would think that it would pop up in that evaluation. But again, if you can talk your way through the mental illness or mental health evaluation, I'm sure that you could just pass it, by just denying certain things. And I hope that doesn't happen. But the veterans working as police officers has been a great benefit, and they're some of the strongest cops. But they're also the ones that are the strong warrior types that refuse to ask for help.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, wow. I wanted to go back because I wanted to ask, if there's a trauma that happens in the police force, why don't they implement resources where it's an automatic like trauma class where they have to go pull them off and they go through like a week trauma class because they've experienced the trauma. I mean, that is psychological help when someone has went through a serious trauma, especially if you have a shooting and you're out as a cop and it's 10 people dead. All of those cops if it's 20 cops, they all should be going through a trauma class. And it doesn't matter. Each time they go through a trauma, there should be an intervention.
Yeah. Back in the day, I was on the SWAT team for about 8 years. And up until about 96 or so, there was nothing. So there would a shooting would occur and there would just be, okay, get back to work. There wasn't even take a couple days off. Unless you were the shooter. If you were the shooter, then you got like 3 days off. Now, I believe it's different. I believe that they're doing, because as I went through critical stress debriefings, so when a tragedy happened, we would do is get all the team members together, like you just said, and even the dispatchers that called it out on the radio, they would all get together and talk about it. And the reason they talk about it is because every person sees that incident differently, right? Just as 4 people watch a traffic accident, each person will see it in a different light according to their glasses that they're wearing. So this gives an opportunity for everybody to fill in those blanks that they didn't know about, which helps process the trauma a lot better in order to put it behind us. So a lot of that's happening now. I don't know the specifics if they actually send them away to anybody, but I do know that they are focusing more on if you've been involved in a critical incident, they really monitor you a lot better now.
Got it. And I do want to ask, going into your daughter's illness, where exactly was your mind frame at the time prior to finding out that news? Was it like that was going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back, or like were you on a uptick? Like where were you at that time?
No, I was in not my deepest addiction, but I was in my addiction. I was basically still working, but see, because of my rank, I really wasn't hands-on. And my team, I had a team of 8 to 10 guys, depending upon what season it was. But I also was wearing braces because of all the surgeries I've been through. So they knew that I really wasn't totally physically fit. I could do my supervisor job, but I really couldn't do the grunt work still. So I was always there, but I was always towards the back. So I was managing, and that's all I could say is I was managing, but I was a basket case really emotionally. But when my daughter got diagnosed, her and I have the same DNA. So part of the story too is, so I said it's a long story, is when she was born, she had a disease called aplastic anemia, which is the body wasn't developing the red blood cells. So if the body doesn't develop the red blood cells, she's vulnerable to all sorts of diseases. So she required a bone marrow transplant. So as soon as she was born, they took her away and they kept her at San Francisco, UCSF San Francisco, which is a fantastic place for bone marrow transplants. And it turns out that I was the direct match for her. Instead of the sibling, my other daughter, which is rare, that it's the one of the parents is the direct match, but I was the direct match. So she went through that. Everything turned out great. I mean, God was good. So in my mind, I'm thinking about this, right? So I'm looking at my injury, or not my injuries, but my disease. My hand, I don't know if you can see, but see my hands are all, these are my fingers. I'm not trying to do that. My feet, I have to wear braces, and now they're all disfigured because of all the surgeries I had. So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, my DNA is flawed. I have all these diseases. I'm basically unfit for duty. I have this problem mentally. I didn't really put it as PTSD. I just put it as deep depression and stress, but it was PTSD. So I'm dealing with all these things. And I'm thinking to myself that if my daughter did die during the surgery, that it would be my fault, right? Because she has my DNA and thus my makeup. And if she died, it would be my fault. And that's what sent me into that deep downward spiral that I just didn't get back from. And like I said, after that, there was suicide attempts and all kinds of stuff because I was chicken. I didn't want to face reality. I didn't want to face my daughter's death. I would rather die before her. And that's when all the self-sabotage occurred. I mean, it's really horrible and a shame to say. And I am ashamed to say that I almost took my life just so I wouldn't have to face life. But I did. But that's the drugs, that's the stress, the depression, the mental illness. That's everything all swirled up, and it really affects your decision-making process.
Don't be ashamed. I've been at the same place that you have been. I attempted suicide. I was going to take 30 packs of Percocets, and my daughter ran in the room, kissed me on the forehead, and told me she loved me. That's why I dropped the pills. So don't be ashamed.
Yeah. Thank you.
My pleasure. Sid, did you have a question? Were you going to say something? Sorry.
I was agreeing to that because, I'm just like, there's really no other reason to want to take your life. So, you are with a group of millions of people. Granted, it's not, a group we would choose willingly, but, you're not alone in that. Everybody's reason is because they don't want to face what's going on in life.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't find your reasoning to, be weak or whatever you might be feeling about it, because that's everybody that has had that thought.
Yeah, and depression is real, and it's suicide comes when you're at your lowest and you're empty and you have no hope and you have no face. It's just nothing. Yeah. It's nothing there. And you don't want to face people. You don't want to talk about it. You don't want to do anything. And it's a buildup, and it drains you. You don't want to do anything. So, this is a good piece of it that you've brought up, Norm, is paying attention to that, especially when we're going through a lot now and getting at our deepest moment. So mental health is real. Pay attention to your mental health. If you are feeling some kind of way, do not ignore it. It's red flags that you are dealing with something, and face those red flags so that you don't end up in a situation like Norm, me. I don't think Sid, I have heard anything, but we're testimony sitting here. So.
And I do want to ask, because we have so many times we've had perspective from people that have been in jail or in prison. However, we have not heard from a cop that has had the pleasure of being in prison for 14 years. So how was that for you? Were you easily recognized? They sniffed you out? Like, how was that? How was that? With the injury, with your diagnosis, how was that?
Yeah. Well, hella scary, that's for sure. But when I was so after my arrest and I was out on bail, that's when I gave my life over to God. I was at my lowest point in my life. And a lot of times that's what has to happen for people is they have to hit the bottom of the barrel to look up and for help, And so when I started going to church, I started meeting a lot of people in church that have been to prison, and they were giving me, hints to go to work my way through it safely. And part of the advice was, well, one guy said, lie, just say you're somebody else. See what they sent me. I'm in California. I'm near San Francisco. And they sent me to Fort Worth, Texas. So that's why nobody knew me over there. So when I went there, I lied. And I said I was a fireman. But after about 6 months, I got a job at the chapel. So I started working at the chapel. I started studying the Bible at that point. A seminary was coming in, and I was taking classes to get my master's degree in theology there. And I felt God saying to me, hey, if you really want to be able to have a testimony, you got to tell the truth. You can't lie to these guys. I was scared to death. And because when you go into prison, you are asked right there the first day, who do you run with? Who is your group? And so the white guys started trying to recruit me. And I just said, no, I'm a Christian. I want to be Switzerland here. I'm not for you. I'm not against you. I'm not for anybody else. I just want to take my time, spend my time in the chapel. And they respected that. There was some repercussions with it. Like I wasn't able to sit at certain tables to eat, which is just crazy, but that's a prison way to do it. I wasn't able to work out at the gym, so they didn't allow me in certain places because of that. But I was threatened one time, but it really wasn't too serious. And then as I began to meet more people, I guess I have this character where people want to unload, and I think that's what makes me a good counselor. People just want to unload. And so I allowed them to just talk and talk and talk. And then other guys would ask me about how to beat their case, not that I would know, but I tried to help them with whatever I could. So the rest of my time there, the first year was a little bit rough, but the rest of my time, I spent 8.5 years in federal prison. The rest of the time was really good. I mean, nobody bothered me. I stuck to my studies and stayed in the chapel.
That's wonderful. I mean, you hear the horror stories of cops getting locked up, so I'm glad you didn't have to experience that.
Sure.
So I wanted to know, did the PTSD make your prison time? Did it get worse on your prison time? Because I can only imagine if you're out, you have PTSD. Did the power of God help with that, or?
Well, so I was out on bail for 2 years, and during that time, I was court-ordered psychologist and psychiatry. And during that time, I did go to a psychiatrist and a psychologist that were secular, that didn't bring God into it. And although I learned a lot of good coping mechanisms that really saved my life, I believe, in other words, when there's a trigger, how to squash that trigger down and how to make it through the next 20 minutes, because triggers only last, 5-10 minutes at the most. You just have to focus your mind on doing something else. So that really helped me a lot. So after 2 years, and then they sent me to Fort Worth in Texas, and they gave me a psychologist there. I spent another year, and so I spent 3 years total. It helped. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying anything against a secular psychologist, but there was no healing. I just talked about, and that was it. And although it helped a little bit, it really wasn't therapeutic for me. It helped. So as I started studying the Bible, and there was another LA police officer down there, and he taught me how to study the Bible with your heart, right? A lot of us, when we read the Bible, we read it in the academic thing, like a book, right? We just read it like a book. But really, you got to put your heart into it. So in other words, you read a paragraph, and depending upon what the paragraph is, you ask yourself, does that apply to me? And if it doesn't apply to me, how does it apply to my life? And if not, then you just move to the next one. And when I finally started to study the Bible, I learned all these different principles that the Bible lays out. I mean, they're spelled out there in the Bible for healing emotional wounds. And so me and the LA guy, we tried to start looking at this. And there was a couple other ministries out there. Elijah House Ministry, I believe they're in Utah. No, Idaho. They're in Idaho. They have a great program. So we studied their stuff. And I really started to work on what God says to heal us. And within 4 months, I I was a different person. I had no more nightmares, no more anxiety attacks, no more panic attacks. So I've been pretty much PTSD free now for about over 11 years. It's been wonderful. And that's what made me want to write the book, because, the 3 years of secular counseling and 4 to 6 months of studying the Bible, it made the world a difference, and I just think there is hope for it. People don't have to live their whole life with this emotional pain that where a lot of us are in.
Absolutely. And since you have kind of been, I guess, PTSD free for so long, at the time of which you weren't, when you still had it, or still dealing with it. Don't get rid of it, but,
Yeah.
change the verdict on that. But
Yeah, you're right.
how do I want to word this? At the time of which you still had it, were you like medicated at the time? So pretty much my question here is, I see that you kind of healed, like you said, through having a Christ-centered makeup or Christ-centered planning or plan of healing. So was there ever a point where you had to maybe, have a mixture of the medically healing versus, along with Christ-centered healing, or, did you feel better with just only the Christ-centered healing, or did you find any type of middle ground that was okay for you before you found Christ? How was that? Just so, the viewers going through it.
Yeah.
Because some people seem to think, with religion, and some people you might learn it from, it's just like, well, that's all you need. Jesus,
Yeah.
Lord, is all you need. So from somebody that, has experienced both sides, what would you, suggest?
So I did my time on about a year of antidepressants and a year of anti-anxiety meds. I'm not at the same time at different points in my life. So it's my opinion that God influenced the doctors into making these medications and prescribing them. And God gave them the wisdom to understand how to prescribe them and to what dosages. So I don't believe in that because you go through the church to heal, you don't do anything else. I believe in order to get your mind straight and to get your attention span back because of the PTSD or whatever else you're suffering through, you need to have that medication that will allow you to absorb the information coming in. Because if you're in high anxiety constantly, you're not going to learn anything. And if you're depressed the same way, I don't want to read the Bible today. I'm tired, I'm sleepy, so we need the medications to get us through. So when I got to prison, they wouldn't give us any kind of medication. So at that time is when I started really studying, because I knew that, I was a basket case, and that's when God just really worked in my life. But I do recommend that if you believe that you're going through a difficult time, first of all, go to your doctor. That's the first thing that you should do, and make sure there's no medical issue causing this emotional issues. Make sure that your diet or the other medications you're taking aren't mixing together and causing you to feel a certain way, that it is emotionally based. And once you've had a complete checkup and your doctors say, yeah, this is more emotional, whatever meds you need at that time, take them, because it's going to just enhance and benefit your life in the long run.
Absolutely. I like that answer.
Yeah, we appreciate the transparency. I wanted to chime back. I wanted to ask you, with the surgeries and other physical issues, we would say, even I would say, I have a disability now for my stabbing. How are you dealing with the changes and the disabilities that have occurred in your life?
Well, a lot better now. Before, back then, before I knew God, I want to say I was agnostic, because I think I knew something was out there, but I didn't know what. So I wasn't an atheist where I didn't believe. But the things I saw really put me in a spot where, how can a kind, loving God allow this disasters and this violence to occur? But when I I started looking at who God is and who He sees us as, that's when everything started to change. So back then, my thing was, well, why me? Why me? I'd lay in bed, my fingers unable to really. I wasn't able to button buttons anymore. My wife would sew Velcro into my shirts, Velcro into my pants, so because I couldn't button the buttons. I was really losing the grip on the weapons that I was issued. So I knew that I was basically a short time away from losing my job because of the disease, not because of anything else. And it was a constant, why me? Oh, why me? What did I do wrong? I thought I was a good person. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Why me? But now that I see that God allows us a lot of times to go through difficult situations in order to prepare us for the kingdom, right? So I see this whole thing different now. I wish, I pray every day, I do, to heal my hands at least, so I can hold a bottle of water. I can't even hold a bottle of water. But God, just like in the Bible, where Paul was asking to be healed, and God said no, you're not ready yet. But one thing I do know is that I'll be healed when I go home. I'll be healed, and that'll be it. And until that time, God's got a purpose for me. In other words, I think that one of the purposes He's allowing me to do is to go on these shows like you're doing, which is awesome, and showing, hey, I've got these disabilities, plus I got a history of mental illness, and you could still come out of it a better person and still fulfill God's will for your life. So the disabilities are still there, but I look at it from a different perspective now. I think that's the easiest way to explain it.
Absolutely. And with their condition, I know you said that it was like degenerative. Is it still able to progress?
Yeah.
Like, is it something like, MS that once it gets to a certain point, you're kind of like invalid, or like, where you still have a value of life, moving forward?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we always have a value of life. So what'll happen is eventually I won't be able to walk. I'll go I got these braces on my feet to probably a cane, from a cane to a walker to a wheelchair. I'm hoping it'll be later. I mean, I'm 62 now, so I'm hoping that maybe by the time I make it to 75, I hope without. But yeah, it's degenerative. It's slow moving. There's nothing we could do about it. There are some tests going on at Stanford on taking the DNA and plucking out that bad strain of DNA that's in me, and putting the DNA back in me clean, that might generate some new tissue and stuff, but that's years away. So yes, it will degenerate. Eventually I'll be in a wheelchair. Eventually I won't be able to do everyday things. I mean, I'm having difficulty even using a fork and knife right now. So, but like I said, I look at it differently. I look at it as, okay, this is something that I can help others with, and that's what I want to keep doing.
Exactly. In your time here.
Yeah, that's and we want folks to see, like, your life can change at any moment. It's like we don't have any control over it. If God is going to put us through a trial and tribulation, He's going to put us through it, and He's able to do whatever He wants. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's important to understand why He does it. So, and that's my next book. It'll be out before December. Be Why God Allows Suffering. Because if you understand the reasons behind it, so God is more worried about He's not worried about our comfort here in this life. What He's worried about is our comfort in eternity, right? Mm-hmm. So if we have difficult times here, it's just going to make that eternal experience much, much better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So while we have a few left, let's go into that. So your books, when did you, get the motivation or the calling to write that book? How was your experience with that? And you said you have some plans on some more. So, what count are you on? Where are we at? Tell us about your, career as a writer now.
Well, I wrote a book a long time ago in 1997 about narcotic enforcement, but that was a police book. But when I was starting to feel better after taking these classes, I started to write down and journal my experiences, because I believe that journaling is a real benefit for everybody. Yeah, right? Right? I mean, if you can't talk to anybody, which you can't in prison, you can't really just tell your innermost darkest secrets to people, but you can write it down. And I truly believe in allowing that trauma, allowing those things that are bothering you, resentments and stuff, to see the daylight, because once they see the daylight, it starts to have less power over you. And so after I got my first degree, I thought, and I felt I was healed. Again, you're truly correct in what you're saying. It never goes away. I'll never forget all the things that happened, but it doesn't have the power over me. The triggers aren't as strong. Every once in a while, I'll get a trigger like watching a TV show or something that really brings back something. And so I thought, wow, I wish I would have known about these biblical principles when I was younger, when it really could have helped me. So I decided to, when I got my my doctorate degree, I wrote my thesis on a Christ-centered healing approach to healing trauma. And I took that, so I had to do the work anyway. So I took that, I made it into a book. And when I was still in prison, I sent it to a couple publishers, and one of them picked it up, and he published it. So I got home in May of 20, and the book came out, I think, December of 20. So it was a real good thing. And then we also wrote a book for small groups, church small groups. It's a study guide. How every church has a small groups, and so they use my book and they use the study guide to go on those weekly groups. And then the biggest thing for me was, why God? Why do you allow this? I mean, why me? I'm a good person, right? That's what everybody says. I'm a good person, and that's why I wrote this other book, which it basically it says, why God allows suffering in this world. And I believe it's important to understand that He has a purpose. Each tear that we have has meaning, and instead of asking God, like, take this away from me, how about asking God, what do you want me to learn from this? What is it that I need to know about this? And I think your whole perspective will change, right? When you change the way you look at things, you can change your attitude and start giving more gratitude. It's because it's all in the battle's in the mind. Joyce Meyer really said it great. It battles in the mind. And that's the only way to win that battle, is through the Holy Spirit, and to keep feeding the Holy Spirit good things.
I love it, because I always tell people, I mean, I validate your message. We say, each situation, what did you learn from it? You have to learn from it so you don't take it to the next situation.
That's right.
So, yeah. I wanted to say really quick, for your law enforcement buddies that all of them turned their back on you, and all the law enforcement folks that have been through this and they've turned their back on them, what would you tell them? Because you've done it before, you learned from it. So what would you say to
them? That's hard. I don't have any. I'm not angry. I'm not bitter about it, because I made those mistakes and I knew better, and I shouldn't have done it. But what I would like them to learn, and this is why I became a chaplain. I was hoping to work in law enforcement chaplain, because if someone is going down that road and they know my story, they can go, wow, maybe I better just talk to someone who's been through this. So in other words, they could come talk to me and say, hey, I notice I'm depressed a lot. I'm doing this. And then maybe I could prevent them from going down that dark road I did. That was my thoughts about it. So because I don't see that happening, I'm focusing more on the church community. And this is for everybody. If someone tells you that your personality has changed, right? Your personality really doesn't change. What happens is you start changing the way you do things to counter your triggers, right? So the personality doesn't change, but you change the way you do things. So if someone says, there's something different about you. You know, you don't seem happy anymore, or you seem depressed or whatever. Please, please, please listen to them. If I would have listened to my wife years and years ago, I would have never been to where I am now. But I wouldn't have healed. I wouldn't have learned the lessons that I had. So I can't say all of that. But please listen to people who are telling you. Please, if you are working, even doctors hang with doctors. Construction guys hang with construction guys. Branch out. Have friends of all varying different communities, because that builds resistance. And when they say something, they're not a cop. So you take that with more weight, right? Because cops won't, well, I shouldn't say cops. The person that's in your working group or your culture, if they say something, you won't take it as serious as someone from out of your bubble there. You know, you can take it more as fact. And then talk to your spouses. You know, if I would have came home and, you know, I don't say I should have given all the gruesome play-by-plays, but I believe that if I would have been more transparent with my wife and say, hey, you know, I had a rough day, and, you know, maybe not tell her what happened, but hey, I'm not feeling so good right now. It's just a sounding board, someone to talk with, someone to let out all that pain. Because when we compartmentalize things, you know, in other words, we hold it in, it's never any good, and it will always backfire, and eventually it'll all come out. When it comes out, it's going to explode. It's going to be dirty.
Absolutely. So we do like to take this time here to do what we call shameless plug. So this is where you let the viewers know how they can contact you, how they can patronize your services, anything you want to draw foot traffic to. This is where you can let us know, or let the viewers know how to reach you. We do have your banner going across, so the floor is yours.
I'm not good at shameless plugs, but my website is Christ-centeredhealing.com. You could have links to where to buy the book on there. You can see a little bit more about me. I put out little videos, only 1-minute videos, kind of little tips here and there. And those are on my Facebook page, Christ-Centered Healing, on my Facebook page and Instagram also. You could buy the book through the publisher, which is listed right there, Christ-centeredhealingbook.com, or you can go to Amazon and get it there also. If there's someone who's really having a difficult time and you need help, I don't counsel. I don't have services that I render, but I will try to help with whatever I can, and maybe refer you or something. If you really are stuck in a bad place, just email me and we can talk. And that's really it. I don't really have nothing else. I just, please, there is hope. That's the message I really want to get out. You don't have to struggle with this pain every day. You don't have to go through the day isolating yourself from others, or putting on this mask that we all put on with the smiley face and stuff. You don't have to do that. There is hope, and that hope is through Jesus Christ.
Look, and I was going to ask you, my next question is to if you can give, because we're almost out of time, one thing advice on something that helped you through your traumas. I think you pretty much said it, but if you have another one thing.
To me, the most important thing was understanding who God is. So in other words, why he does things, that he's sovereign, that things happen for a reason, that the world isn't full of just coincidences and random things. He's got this plan. You're part of this plan. The persons that come into your bubble every day are part of the plan. We just don't see it. It'll take years. And even then we might not be able to see it. But when we get up there, I guarantee that he'll tell you about that plan. And then knowing how he sees us, right? If we know that he loves us and we were knitted in, he knitted us in his womb, it's hard to have low self-esteem, right? It's hard to have low, think bad of yourself. And so I think those are the two most important things: to study the Bible, learn who he is, and learn who he sees you as.
Okay. I believe in God. I pray every day. So for those that don't, it's someone that there's a higher power that you look up to. So thank them. Thank them all the time, especially for life, each and every day. Yes. Norm, we want to thank you for tuning into Unfiltered Unspoken. You have been a blessing, especially on the law enforcement side and being transparent and being very honest. Sid, is there anything else you want to say? Or
No.
nope. Okay. Well, as you know, we're going to continue to bring life experiences and share in hopes that someone will connect with others. You heard Norm's testimony today, 26 years in state law enforcement, and he brought the real. He was very transparent about it. PTSD is real. Mental health issues are real. So law enforcement, if you're not, please get our protection, more mental evaluations and more mental resources or classes or counselors to help them through the traumas that they are going through. And as Norm said, God first. God is the Almighty. And we want to thank you for tuning into Unfiltered Unspoken Podcast. We are going to continue to share life experiences to help others going through similar situations in hopes that you will connect with someone.